Okay. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See. Alhamdulillah.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Habib, how's everything? Long time.
Good, man. Sitting Amir, man. I know. How you been?
Alhamdulillah, I've been well. Just, been working, staying
Alhamdulillah.
productive as much as I can. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil Alameen. Awesome. Alhamdulillah. Man, I need to comb my beard. Alhamdulillah. That's a sunnah. Say that to Aisha radiallahu ta'ala. Our mother talked about, how the Prophet ﷺ, he never had like a unkempt matted beard, but just now on camera, so I'm just not seeing. But inshallah, you all will forgive me. Inshallah, we'll open up. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي على صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره المقدار العظيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وأزواجه وأمهات المؤمنين وذرياته وأهل البيت كما صليت على إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم إني أسألك من كل خير سألك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وأعوذ بك من كل شر استعاذك من محمد النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم اغفر لنا ما قدمنا وما أخرنا وما أسررنا وما أعلنا وما أنت أعلم منا ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من فتنة المحيا والممات ومن فتنة القبر ومن فتنة المسيح الدجال ومن عذاب النار وسوء المصير اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد رضي الله عن أصحاب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا همة الشيخ واحترنا بهذا المحضر ولتعطفي بنظرة تأتينا بظفر أما بعد Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to our weekly Maliki Fiqh class. Alhamdulillah. I'm very happy to see all of you. I think we have maybe a couple of people who either haven't been with us or haven't been with us very many times. So I will say in the way of a brief reintroduction, my name is Brother Habibur-Rasul. I am teaching this information from my studies primarily with Sheikh Amin Abdul Awal, who is one of our elders who has been learning and teaching the Maliki Madhab longer than probably anybody else in this part of the world. Please keep Sheikh Amin in your dua. He's, he's older and he's having some health challenges. So he's, but alhamdulillah, he's doing well. He's with his daughter in Arizona. But, he gave me the permission to teach this information. We are studying from a book, which is a compilation of rulings that Sheikh Amin studied and learned from Dr. Suleiman Dunya, a big luminary, big well-known Maliki fiqh scholar from Egypt, Sheikh al-Azhar. Actually, he was one of the foremost scholars at Azhar in Maliki fiqh and Aqidah, theology. And alhamdulillah, I'll address that in a minute, but and Aqidah and Tasawwuf and Islamic philosophy. Someone just asked if I can send a recording. So alhamdulillah, now we're actually recording all of the classes and putting them up on YouTube. So as soon as this class is over, you can just go on the YouTube page for Ruhul Adab. What is it called? It's called the Ruhul Adab group, yeah? Look at it here. Yep, Ruhul Adab group. RUHULADAB group. And you will see this class and previous classes up there on YouTube. So you don't have to wait for me to send you recordings anymore, because I know that was getting to be arduous and long. But alhamdulillah, the recordings are available. So this information is taken from a book called Ashar As-Saghir, which is a text, a high-level Maliki fiqh text written by Sheikh Ahmed Dardir, who's one of the big scholars of the madhab. He's also a person who is known for his wilaya, known for his righteousness, known for standing up for the people who were oppressed in Egypt at his time in the 18th century, and he was known for miracles. He used to make dua for the people and use his maqam, you could say, to address the kinds of oppression that people were facing at the hands of the government at the time. We can talk more about that if people are interested and haven't heard me talk about it in the past. But in any case, Ashara Saghir is Sheikh Ahmed Dardir's commentary on his own text, Aqrab al-Masalik. And this is a text that's used on the graduate level for the Maliki Madhab. And Dr. Suleiman Dunya taught sections of this text, subjects from this text to Sheikh Amin. And Sheikh Amin compiled those lessons in a book in English, and that is what he taught me, and that is what I'm teaching you all. I'm also drawing upon some other studies that I did while in Medina Bay, Kaolack in Senegal with Ustadh Barham Sal, who was one of our beloved elder teachers. For those of you, I don't know if anybody in this group right now falls in this description, but if you know any of our brothers and sisters who went to study in Medina Bay in the 80s and the 90s as young people, for those that, in addition to studying Quran, studied some fiqh, they invariably ended up studying with Ustadh Barham Sal. So he's one of our gems, one of our teachers of fiqh in our community. And I was able to study with him some of the introductory books in the madhab like Al-Akhdari, Ashmawiyya, Murshid al-Mu'in, Muqaddimat Izziya. And also I was able to study a little bit with a Mauritanian scholar named Ustadh Ahmed Fall. We did about half of a book called the Risala, Ibn Abi Zayd. And I'm also drawing on conversations I've had with Sheikh Maya Sisi and Imam Sheikh Tijani Sisi over time, and other subjects I've been able to study with other teachers over some time. So that's just to let you know a little about what we're doing, what we're pulling from, in case you haven't heard me talk about it before. I haven't talked about it in a while, but in case some of the folks who I know haven't been here often haven't heard me talk about it, I want to talk about it. Tayyib, alhamdulillah. And someone said that they shared a PDF of Ashmawiya in the group. Thank you so much. Jazakumullah khair. That's awesome. So we are, alhamdulillah. One thing I'll say, because Sister Tasneem mentioned that she also shared the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd. You know, Ibn Abi Zayd, alhamdulillah, no problem. And also I'll say, in terms of my own background, I studied with Sheikh Amin for about 7 years and then continued, to study with him as I was teaching and consult with him and whatnot. But also, by trade, I'm a historian, so sometimes you'll hear me talk a little bit about the history of Islam in the West and, in the Americas and West Africa and whatnot. This is kind of my day job, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. If you are consulting Maliki fiqh text on your own, there are certain texts. I mean, first of all, you always got to look at, is it a good translation or not? But there are certain texts that I think you can feel safe using as a resource to help you as you're studying. Like Akhdari, there's some good translations of Akhdari. Ashmawiyya, really good translation of Ashmawiyya that I like, that I believe is the one that Sister Tasneem shared. Murshid al-Mu'in, there's some good translations out there as well. But Risala, I would tell you to be cautious about reading the Risala on your own, or at least implementing what you read there on your own. Certainly, if you want to go further in your studies and read it, that's good. If you have the opportunity to study it with a teacher, alhamdulillah. But the Risala has some rulings, not the opinions that my teachers favor. And the Risala, because it's a book that's a little bit more detailed, it gets into things like mu'amalat, it gets beyond just ibadah and gets into subjects like inheritance and marriage and things like that. I would say, you don't want to just open the Risala and just run with what you read without consulting a teacher or something like that. Read it if you want to read it, but, just bear in mind that this is a book that some of our teachers have kind of cautioned us against just sort of reading and trying to implement it without studying it with a teacher or having a stronger background in studying the madhab. So just want to put that out there, because I know stuff is out there. You come across stuff online And sometimes we read stuff online, and I don't think this is the case with anybody in this group, but I've definitely encountered people who, I read the Risala and it says this and this is the way, and maybe they don't have a broad enough understanding to really know what to do with what they're finding in the Risala. So, just giving that word of caution. Again, not because I'm really worried about anybody in this group doing that, but I just want to put it out there just to, kind of give that advice so we can be safe, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Somebody sent me a message that they're doing some studies with one of our teachers out in Detroit, Brother Muhammad Zaki. May Allah preserve him. Alhamdulillah, may Allah give you tawfiq. Alhamdulillah, tayyib. So we're going to jump back into what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks, which is sujood as-sahw, the prostration of forgetfulness, how to make up for a mistake in the prayer. And I was recently listening to a class by a brother named Sheikh Walid Mus'ad. You may find some of his stuff online. I like him. He's a brother who studied the madhab and studied aqidah and a lot of different things. And he has some good resources online. And I just happened to chance upon his class where he's talking about sujood as-sahw as well. And he mentioned something that I thought was beneficial. He mentioned the different words for forgetting in Arabic. And he mentioned that as-sahw is a word that means essentially omission, right? Like when you forgot something and it was never there, right? As opposed to other words, I forget the Arabic words, but other words that have the connotation of you did something but then you forgot it or something like that, or you had the knowledge present and then it left you. But this is sahw. In this context, we don't mean forget like you just forgot something. We mean that you forget in the sense that you omitted something, you forgot to do something, right? And a part of that is having doubt about whether or not you did a thing or whatnot. We talked about that a bit last week, but this week we're going to talk more about this issue of doubt, forgetting and doubt. So the heading of this section is actually forgetting and doubt. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I think I covered everything from the last section. I think we finished it last week. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Bismillah. So, Bismillah. What you forget or miss is more important than what you are doing if they are equal. What you forget or miss is more important than what you are doing if they are equal. I'm going to read a couple of the points and then I'm going to go back and explain them to give some context. The second point they have here is that generally you do not go back to do a sunnah and leave a fard that you are doing. And then the next point is number 3, if you have a doubt, occasionally obey it. But if you have any doubt that happens once a day or more, then disregard it. So we'll go back and explain some of this more. So the first point we said, what you forget or miss is more important than what you are doing if they're equal. What do they mean by that? They mean that if you're in the prayer, you're in the salah, and you forgot to do something, and you remember that you forgot to do something, it's more important for you to go back and do that thing that you missed than to keep doing what you're doing, assuming the two things are equal. What do they mean by equal? Is one thing a fard? Is one thing a sunnah? If the thing you're doing is a fard and the thing you forgot is a sunnah, then what you're doing is bigger than what you forgot, right? Because the fard is always bigger than the sunnah, right? The fard is always bigger than the sunnah. But if you are doing a fard and you realize that you forgot to do a fard, then you should go back and address that fard, right? You should go back and address that fard, right? If you are still in a place in the prayer where you can go back and address a thing. I'm going to discuss this. I'm going to describe this in a little bit of a different way in a moment. But this is just kind of to introduce the subject in the way that we have in the book. The second point is that generally you do not go back to do a sunnah and leave a fard that you are doing. So, if I am in my second rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr, or let's say I'm in my first rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr, that's a better example, and I am making ruku', and I remember, oh wow, I didn't make my surah after Fatiha, right? I didn't say some ayats of the Quran after I said the Fatiha, right? I forgot to do that. What I'm doing now, making ruku, is a fard. So I can't go back to fix a sunnah if it means I have to leave a fard, right? I can't go back to fix a sunnah if it means I have to leave a fard. Now, those are 2 points that they give, point 1 and 2. Now I'm going to give a more expansive explanation that I hope makes it a little bit more clear, inshallah ta'ala. Generally speaking, if you're making salah and you remember that you forgot a thing, the first thing you ask yourself, was it the thing that I forgot, a fard or a sunnah? If it's a sunnah, right, and you've already moved on to the next stage of the prayer, then you don't go back and fix it. Okay? If it's a sunnah and you've already moved on to the next part of the prayer, you don't go back and fix it. The classic example, you're making salat, let's say you're making salatul maghrib, right? Let's say you're making salatul maghrib. And after the second rak'ah, you're supposed to sit down and sit in jalsa, is the sitting position, is the name for the sitting position in Arabic, and you say atashahud. But what if you forget to say the atashahud? If you remember before you have completely left the ground, let's say your hand is still on the ground, one of your hands is still on the ground, or one of your knees is still on the ground, then you just say, oh, let me just sit down and make the atashahud. You haven't moved on to the next stage of the prayer yet. But once your hands and your legs have left the ground, your hands and knees have left the ground for you to stand up in qiyam for the third rak'ah, you can no longer go back to fix the jalsa, right? Because you can't leave the fard of standing for the third rak'ah to fix the sunnah of sitting to make a tashahhud, right? Can't go back to fix a sunnah after you have moved on to the next thing, because you can't leave a fard to fix a sunnah. Someone asked, the second ayah after al-Fatiha is a sunnah. Yes. So I'll go back to that. I'll go back to that in a bit, because so the thing about this subject matter is that they say the issue of sujood sahl is a lot like math. It builds on each other. Like before you do multiplication, you do subtraction and addition, right? So before we talk about how you fix the prayer, we cover the topics of what is a fard in the prayer, what is a sunnah in the prayer, what is what they call sunnah khafifa, like a light sunnah in the prayer, what is a mustahab in the prayer, right? Now, just the nature of how we teach this class and the nature of life is that people sometimes plug in, at different stages in the lesson. So no problem, we can go back and do a bit of a refresher, and we'll go back to that subject. Eventually, we'll get back to the issue, to the subject of fards and sunnahs, and we have some of the classes recorded too. And actually, we need to go back at some point and actually title the previous classes according to their subject matter. Maybe somebody can help me do that, inshallah ta'ala. We can go through some of the previous classes. Usually within the first maybe 10-15 minutes, you'll see what the subject matter is, and we can fill in that for people who are coming in late. But in any case, the fard, it is a fard. The fards of the prayer are all of the positions in the prayer, right? The takbiratul ihram, the first Allahu Akbar you make to start the prayer, is a fard. The Fatiha in every rak'ah is a fard. Among the sunnahs of the prayer, and there's others, but I'm just saying it quickly to give you what's relevant for this lesson, inshallah. To say some ayats of Quran after Fatiha in the first 2 rak'ah of a fard prayer, this is a sunnah. This is called a sunnah muakkada, meaning a strong sunnah, an emphasized sunnah. A sunnah that if you miss it, you should make sujood sahl before salams to correct it. If you miss a strong sunnah, you make sujood sahl before salams. If you miss 2 or more light sunnah, sunnah khafifa, the sunnahs that are not sunnah muakkada, some say 2, some say 3. If you miss 2 or more, then you make sujood sahl before salams, right? If you miss a fard, then you have to go back and fix that fard. And when you go back and fix that fard, that will probably cause you to have extra motions in the prayer. And whenever you add extra things to the prayer, you make sujood sahl after salams. Quick refresher. You omit something, sujood sahl before salams. You add something, sujood saw after salam. I mean, if you add something like you add an extra sajda, extra rakat, something like that. If you add a movement that has nothing to do with the prayer, like you scratch your face, you fix your glasses, that doesn't count. We're not talking about that kind of stuff, right? But when you add a motion to the prayer that's like something in the prayer, you make sujood saw after salams, right? Practically speaking, usually you added something to the prayer if you forgot whether or not you did something. I wasn't sure if I made 3 rakats or 4 rakats, so I made an extra rakat to make sure I made 4, right? That's adding to the prayer. So you can make sujood saw after salams to cover that. Or if you had to fix a fard, in fixing the fard, you'll probably have added some motions to the prayer, which now will leave you to make sujood saw after salams. And if you omitted something and added something to the prayer, then you make sujood saw before salams. Everybody following me? I know for some of you this is a review, but for some it may not be. So is everybody with me? Does everybody follow all of that we just discussed? Does anybody not? Anybody have any questions about that or need me to say that again in a different way?
Yeah, sorry, really quickly. I was wondering, so you said if you miss something and then you add something in the salah, you would make the sujood before salam. So does that include, for example, if you miss a fard and then you go back and add and you're adding, something else, just like in the movements or whatever, since you have to repeat the fard, would that then mean that you would make the sujood before the salam and then another one after?
No, that's a great question. No, that's not what it means. So if you add, so you're never going to make sujood saw before and after salams. You're always going to do one or the other, right? You're always going to do one or the other. If you omit a sunnah, this is, I think, a clear way to put it, and this isn't how the books always put it, but this is how I'm going to put it. If you miss a strong sunnah or multiple light sunnah, right? You make sujood saw before salams. Making sujood saw before salams is never the appropriate response for missing a fard, right? It's never the appropriate response for missing a fard. If you miss a fard, you have to fix the fard, and once you fix the fard, you will have added to the prayer. So you're never going to make a sujood saw before salams to address a mistake you made in the fard. Sujood saw before salams is always going to come when you miss a sunnah that's big, right? If you miss a light sunnah, like you miss one takbir, not the first takbir, the takbir of the ihram that you use to start the prayer, but you miss a different takbir, or you miss something like saying Sami Allahu liman hamida one time, Rabbana wa lakal hamd one time, right? Something like this, you don't actually have to make sujood saw to fix. But if you miss one of the major sunnah, like sitting after the second rakat for a tashahhud in a prayer that has more than 2 rakat, right? Or if you miss saying some verses from Quran after the Fatiha, these things require you to make sujood saw before salams. Got me?
Yeah, I do. All right, thank you. Jazakallah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions about what I've said so far? Okay. So, if you are making the salat and you remember that you omitted something from an earlier stage in the Quran, if the thing you omitted is a sunnah, right, what do you do? Anybody, what do you do?
You make sujood before the salam.
You make sujood before salam, exactly. Alhamdulillah. Do you go back and fix it?
No, because it's not fard.
Alhamdulillah. Awesome. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you. That is absolutely correct. Now, if you are making salah and you remember that you omitted something earlier in the prayer that was a fard, what do you do? Now, several of you have heard this information enough times that you know I'm expecting one of you to speak up, inshallah ta'ala.
Could you repeat that again?
No problem. Let's say you are making Salatul Dhuhr and you are in the second rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr, and you remember that you missed a fard, right, from an earlier moment in the prayer, maybe from the first rak'ah or from somewhere before where you are right now, what do you do?
So you could go ahead, sis. You go ahead.
Sorry. Is the first thing you do is you make up the fard to go back and do the fard?
Perfect. That is 100% correct. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Now, here's the thing where it gets to be a little bit tricky and a little bit nuanced, right? Where you are in the prayer determines how you go back and fix the fard. There are some situations where you fix the fard by going back to the fard that you missed, making it and making everything that comes after that. Like, let's say, for instance, you are in the second rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr, and you're in Qiyam, and you're making your Fatiha, and you realize, I missed the sajda, I missed the sujood. I went down and made one sajda, and I stood up to make Qiyam, and I forgot to make the second sajda at the end of the first rak'ah. Follow me? Follow the scenario? Forgot to make the second sajda in the first rak'ah, and now I'm standing up in the qiyam of the second rak'ah, making Fatiha. What do? In that case, I sit back down in Jalsa, the position that came just before the sajda that I missed, and I make the sajda that I missed. And then I stand back up in qiyam and I do all the rest of my prayer. So I go back to the thing I missed, I complete it, and then I do everything that came after that. And then I'll make sujood saw when?
After salam.
After salams, exactly. Because I added these extra movements to the prayer. I added the fact that, okay, everything that I did before I remembered that I missed the sajda, right, is like something I added to the prayer, right? So I went back, I made the sajda that I missed, redid everything that came after that, right, and everything that comes after that, and I make sujood saw after salams. But if you omit something that's far from the prayer and you don't remember until after the ruku' of the next rak'ah, basically the following ruku', right? The ruku', the bending, when you bend over and you put your hands on your knees, this is the cutoff point for being able to fix a fard in the rak'ah and keep that rak'ah. So let's say, for instance, same scenario. I missed the sajda, missed the second sajda of the first rak'ah of Salatul Dhuhr. But I don't remember until after I make ruku' of the second rak'ah in Salatul Dhuhr, right? So I missed the sajda, I did everything that comes after the sajda, and then I bowed for ruku', and then I remembered, oh, I missed the sajda of that first rak'ah. What do? In this case, that second rak'ah that you made actually becomes canceled, right? That rak'ah becomes canceled. And you have to redo that rak'ah after you finish the prayer. Or not after you finish the prayer, excuse me. Not after you fix the prayer. But that rak'ah becomes canceled and you replace it with the next rak'ah. So let's give a real world scenario. Same scenario. Missed the sajda of the first rak'ah, right? And then I make the ruku' of the second rak'ah. And then I realize, man, I missed the sajda of that first rak'ah. What do? You continue with the prayer, right? But now the second rak'ah that you made becomes like your first rak'ah that you made. And so now the third rak'ah that you made becomes your second rak'ah. So basically that first rak'ah that's missing a fard becomes canceled. So by the time you finish your prayer, it will be like you had 5 rak'ah in the prayer, because the first rak'ah that you prayed is an incomplete rak'ah that you had to remake. So you will make sujood saw after salams for this incomplete rak'ah in the beginning of your prayer. Is that clear for everybody?
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
So the first rakat becomes voided as soon as you bow down, or is it like after you recite and say like Sami Allahu liman hamidah?
That's a good question. I believe it's once you bow down, like once your hands are touching your knees. That's what I remember. But
Okay.
But that's a good question. I'm gonna jot that down in my notes to ask.
And then my other question is, so what if like you forgot to recite the Fatiha and then you already bow down? Do you stand back up and recite the Fatiha? Like since you have to kind of repeat the first rakat again, do you recite the Fatiha again? Like do you start from the beginning?
Okay. Somebody sent me a funny text. I'm sorry. So in that situation, you would stand. You said, what happens if you forget the Fatiha and you don't remember until you go into ruku, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So in that situation, you would not stand up and make the Fatiha because you bowed for ruku. So that last rakat that you made becomes canceled. Right? And so you go ahead with the rest of that rakat, but then you're going to have to replace it with another rakat. So if you forgot the Fatiha and you bowed for ruku, then if you forgot the Fatiha and you bowed for ruku, then that means the next rakat you made would replace that rakat where you missed the ruku. Right? I'm trying to. Is the Fatiha? You know what? Let me return to that question next week, inshallah, because I'm a little confused because of something that I recently came across in another book. So there may be. I want to just make sure that I'm giving you the right information. Y'all, for those of you who haven't been with me that long, you know I'm kind of a stickler for that, right? Like making sure I double check anything that I have some lack of clarity on. But I feel pretty strong about this, but I do want to go back and double check just to make sure. So we'll reconvene on this next week, inshallah. But I believe that the answer is, in that situation, you continue with the prayer. You don't stand up and make the Fatiha. You continue with the prayer, and then you just go back and remake that rakat that where you were missing the Fatiha. You follow me?
Yeah, I follow you. My follow-up question would be then, you make up that rakat. So then are you back at the first one? Like, are you back at, let's say it's the first rakat for Dora.
Right.
And then you realize when you make ruku in the second rakat that you forgot the Fatiha.
In the first rakat.
Maybe you realize in the second rakat
that you forgot. Right.
You forgot
the second ruku that you forgot the Fatiha in the first rakat.
Yes.
So then that second rakat that you're in, that you're making ruku for, has become your first rakat.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions about any of that we've already covered?
Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify something really quickly. So if you miss a fard, like for example, you were saying the second sajda in the first rak'ah, and then you remember before the ruku of the second rak'ah, would you, once you go back into the sitting position and redo that second sujood, would you just resume from where you left off, like since you haven't made the ruku yet, or would you need to repeat? Would you need to go back and redo the second rakah, if that makes sense?
So you're saying you remembered that you made a mistake before you got to the ruku?
Yeah. Once you finish correcting the fard mistake, do you redo that ruku that you? I mean, do you redo the rakah that you were in, or do you not redo it since you haven't made the ruku yet?
You don't redo it since you haven't made the ruku. If you remember
Oh,
that you made a mistake before you reach the next ruku, then you're it becomes easier to fix. So then you just fix the problem and do everything that comes after that moment. So you go back and make your sajda if that's what you missed, and then you just continue your prayer like normal and make sujood salah after salam. You don't have to redo anything else. Follow me?
right. Sorry, but I'm just asking then. So after you correct that mistake, would you go back into, for example, reciting in the second rakah? Would you just stand up and then like would you recite the Fatiha and stuff, for example?
I see what you're saying. So you're in the second rakah. You said Fatiha. Now you're saying some ayats after Fatiha, and then you remember, oh, I missed sajda, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You go back and you make the sajda, and then you stand up again and you recite the Fatiha again, and the verses
Okay.
again. Is that
Oh,
your question?
but that still counts as a second rakah, though.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
No problem. Yeah, I'm sorry that Sister Zainab that I have some doubt about the answer to that question, but we'll come back to that next week. But
No problem. No need to say sorry. Willing to take it to get answered, inshallah.
Inshallah, no problem. You know, this is one of those subjects that every time this subject, and for it used to be like this with the subject of traveling too, but this subject is a subject that, you know, every time we study it, I end up relearning something and learning something new. Like, this is just one of those subjects that can be a bit challenging, you know. And yeah. But alhamdulillah. But the good thing is, once you get this strong, you know, this is this. I mean, Allahu Alam, but I think some of the scholars would say this is probably the hardest subject in the Maliki method. So once you have this strong, you know, everything else is sort of, I don't want to say easy, but, you know, relatively easy, inshallah. But the reason I asked is if everybody's caught up, if everybody understands what we're saying, is because the next point that I'm going to give is an important one that I don't want to throw you off. Now, this principle of you don't leave a fard to do a sunnah, this results in one other factor, one other thing that we have to keep in mind. If you miss a fard in one of your first two rak'ah, and this is for a prayer that has more than two rak'ah, so every fard prayer other than Salatul Subh, right? Other than Salatul Subh or Salatul Fajr is the other name for Salatul Subh. You miss a fard in the first two rak'ah of any other prayer, right? And you won't remember until after the ruku of the following prayer. So this means you have to go back and that rakat that's missing a fard is canceled, right? But in your makeup rakah, right? In your makeup rakah, once you get to essentially your third rakah, right? You're not going to say a surah or some verses from Quran after the Fatiha, right? Why? Because that's considered a sunnah, and you don't leave a fard to do a sunnah, right? So let's say, for instance, you're in your second rak'ah of dhuhr, and you remember that you didn't make sujood or you didn't make Fatiha or something in your first rak'ah, right? So now the second rak'ah becomes your first rak'ah. And your third rak'ah is going to be like your second rak'ah. But in this third rak'ah, which is actually your second rak'ah, you're only going to recite Fatiha. You're not going to recite a surah after Fatiha, right? Which means that you will have likely omitted something and added something. Why? You added everything that you had to do in order to make up an extra rak'ah to account for the rak'ah that was incomplete, but you're also omitting something because you're making, a rak'ah now that doesn't have the sunnah of saying some Quran, some ayats of Quran after Fatiha. So now you've omitted and you've added. So since you've omitted and added, what do you do at the end of the prayer to make up for the prayer? When do you make sujood sahwi?
Is it after you salams out?
No, it's going to be before you salam out. Because anytime you both omit something and add something, you make sujood sahwi before salam. That was a question to see if you were remembering the principle from before, but I hadn't said it, so so it's kind of a tricky question. Alhamdulillah, mashallah, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, thank you, Sidi Amir, for that. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, we used to ask Sheikh me the same question 10, 20 times. He would just patiently answer it again, Alhamdulillah. But yeah, so does everybody follow that last part? When you make up this extra rak'ah, you're now going to end up omitting the ayahs from Quran after Fatiha, as well as adding everything you had to do to make this additional rak'ah, to make up for the rak'ah that was incomplete. So you will have omitted and added. And because of that, you're going to make sujood sahwi before salams. Everybody clear on that? Anybody unclear on that?
Assalamu alaikum. So to be honest, it's complicated. So it takes a minute to integrate all of it. And that's all I want to say. I don't have any questions because I don't even know what to ask, because we'll be here for a minute to really kind of keep up steps with what you're saying. But inshallah, it'll get integrated. I'm taking it.
No, for sure. And just so you know, it's not just you, it's this subject. It's not just you and it's not every subject. It's this subject. This is a challenging subject, particularly in the Maliki method. I think I said this last week. I remember talking to a friend of mine who studies, but he's from a different madhab. He studies a different madhab. He said their joke is, they say, in the Hanafi madhab, you do sujood sahwi this way. In the Shafi madhab, you do it that way. And in the Maliki method, you just don't make a mistake, because the sujood sahwi is so complicated, you don't want to put yourself in that position. But another thing I'll say is that because it's a bit nuanced, different books kind of deal with it differently, right? And, I think it's okay to say this. Sometimes we may be studying from a book that's a great book, one of the most relied upon books, excellent book, but it may not be the clearest in how it describes a particular subject, right? So what I want to do, I want to go through it in this book for the barakah of going through it the way we went through it with Sheikh Amin. But Sheikh Amin would even go through this subject with us a couple of different times, a couple of different ways. So what I think I'm going to do is, after we finish this subject, because it's one of the last subjects in the book, right? So we're almost finished with the book. After we finish this, it's just like a couple of very short lessons before we finish the book. So what I think I'm going to do is, we'll finish the book and then we'll take 1 or 2 classes. We'll try to do it in 1 class, but we may need 2. And I'm going to go through this lesson in Akhdari, which is one of the first sort of introductory Maliki fiqh books that you usually study. Because even though it's an introductory book, I think it really discusses the subject of sujood sahwi in a pretty clear and concise way. So if it's not fully clicking, don't worry, just write it down. Try to hold on to as much of it as you can, and then we're going to go through it again from a different book, so organized and explained in a slightly different way. And when you hear it in a different way, that might be a little bit clearer. Okay, so just hold on. I know plugging in on this particular subject can be a bit challenging, and some of it may be me. You know what I mean? Like, after somebody who's been teaching this thing 10 years, 20 years, 30 years has probably figured out, okay, this is the best way to explain this particular subject. But I'm still kind of, figuring out. Every time I teach this subject, I end up saying, okay, I'm not going to really discuss this. I'm going to discuss it this way. I'm not going to say it that way because it's confusing. So bear with me. But inshallah ta'ala, we're going to go through this a couple of different ways. So stick with us, and inshallah, in a few weeks, we're going to go through it in Akhtari as well, and that might make it a little bit easier. I see someone asked a question, and after this, inshallah, we'll move on and start to wrap up. Someone said, when you don't omit or forget an action in your prayer and you are doing everything right, are you supposed to recite surahs after Fatiha in the third or fourth rakah? I always thought you don't recite surahs after Fatiha in the third and fourth rakah. No, you do not recite surahs after the third and fourth rakah, only in the first and second rakah. So if you're making Salatul Dhuhr, you recite some Quran after Fatiha in the first rakah and in the second rakah. And in the third and fourth rakah, you only recite Fatiha. For Maghrib, first rakah, you recite Fatiha and some Quran after Fatiha. Second rakah, you recite Fatiha and a surah or some ayahs of Quran after Fatiha. The third rakah in Maghrib, you just recite Fatiha. You don't recite any Quran after Fatiha. Ameen. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah. So, it's almost 10, so I'm going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes and leave at least 10 minutes for some questions and answers. Inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Doctor.
Yes, sir.
To follow up to the question that was just asked.
Yes.
If we forget and we start to recite after in the third or fourth, after Al Fatiha.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the follow up question is: do we do sajda? Do we do the sajda, or we just stop where we are and continue further?
I would say stop where you are. I believe that's a very small mistake. If you're making Fatiha, and let's say you finish Fatiha and you're in the third rakah, and then you start to say to yourself silently, "Oh, I realize that this is the third rakah," then I would just I would not make sujood salah for that. If you add a lot, like you recite Surah Yasin after Fatiha, then I would probably make sujood salah after salam because it's more, right? But if it's just an ayat or two and then you remember, oh, I'm actually in my third rakah, I wouldn't make sujood salah for that. No. Does that answer your question?
Alhamdulillah, thank you.
Alhamdulillah, no problem. Thank you for the question. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So I am going to read a little bit more from the lesson before we open up the questions and answers, just to get through it. Those first 2 points, there was a lot in those first 2 points, but the rest is getting into now some straightforward stuff about how we treat doubt. So the third point from today's section: if you have a doubt occasionally, you obey it. But if any doubt happens once a day or more, then disregard it. What does that mean? That means if every now and then you find yourself doubting whether or not you did I say Fatiha, did I not? Did I make sajda, did I not? Did I do 3 rakah or 4 rakah? I'm not sure. If this situation happens once every now and then, or once a week, once every few days, then you pay attention to the doubt. And if you have doubt, like real doubt about whether or not you did a thing in your prayer, you're 50-50, so to speak, then you should assume that you did not do the thing that you're doubtful about and do it. Maybe this means, like, let's say you're not sure if you made 3 rakah in Salatul Maghrib or 2 rakah, right? Then you make an extra rakah to make sure that you made at least 3. Now you might have made 3, you might have made 4, no problem. You make sujood salah after salams, right? That's what you do when you have doubt. And you should not feel bad about this, because they say the patched prayer, meaning the prayer where you make sujood salah, you do these things to fix the prayer, and you make sujood salah before salams, after salams, is actually worth more than the normal prayer. Why? The patched prayer is worth more than the normal prayer. Why? Because you had to do some work to learn how to correct the mistake in your prayer. And then you had to apply what you learned. And so because of that, now you have this patch prayer, which is worth more, right? Doesn't mean you should make mistakes intentionally, right? You don't have the right to do that. If you intentionally make a mistake in your prayer, then the prayer it can become invalid depending on what kind of thing you've done. But when you mistakenly made a mistake in the prayer, don't let the shaitan make you start to feel bad about the fact that you made a mistake and you corrected it. No, alhamdulillah, Allah gave you the opportunity to apply what you know. And now this patch prayer is worth even more than the prayer would normally be worth. But let's say the doubt comes to you every day or multiple times a day. Every day you find yourself making at least one prayer where you're not sure if you made all the rakats you needed to make or not. You're not sure, whether or not you made sajda in the rakat or made ruku in the rakat. If that kind of doubt happens to you every day, then ignore the doubt. Ignore the doubt. Because that's the shaitan, a'udhu billah, trying to create doubt in your prayer to the point where you begin to not want to pray because you're always having this doubt, right? So if the doubt comes to you all the time, you ignore the doubt. And the way you ignore the doubt, if the doubt is, now this is some practical advice. If doubt is coming to you every day, I would say really take stock of whether or not this doubt is like a doubt where every day you find yourself being 50-50 about whether or not you made something in the prayer, or whether it's a situation where you're pretty sure that you did everything you were supposed to do in the prayer, but you just have this kind of creeping suspicion, right? It's not a situation where you're 50-50. You really have no idea whether you made it or not. It could be either or. But no, you started off pretty sure that you made it, but then this thought creeped in your mind. Maybe I didn't make it. That ignore completely and assume that you did the thing that you're in doubt about. That is you have to train yourself to not pay any attention to that doubt. That doubt is not real doubt. That doubt is just a kind of, you're imagining that you have a problem with your prayer when you really don't. Kick that out. Don't listen to that at all. But now, if you really have a sincere situation where you're not sure whether or not, I shouldn't say sincere because it's all sincere, inshallah. But if you really have a serious doubt where you're 50-50 as to whether or not you made everything you were supposed to make in your prayer, you really don't know. You really don't have a strong inclination either way, right? If that's the case, then ignoring the doubt means assuming that you did not do the thing that you thought you did and doing it just to cover yourself, right? Right, and doing it just to cover yourself, right? That happens to you every day. Then you assume that, you didn't do the thing. You do it, and then you don't make sujood aside after salams because you're ignoring the doubt, right? You're ignoring the doubt. That's if it happens to you every single day, right? But if it were to happen to you once every other day or something like that, then you actually pay attention to that. Finally, yes, sister, okay.
Assalamu alaikum. So I have two questions. One is about forgetting the essential part of tahajjud salat, which is the part where you stand up and you say the dua with your hands, when you're standing, right? What happens if you forget to do the standing and go down into sujood? I mean, that's like the whole distinction of...
Say that last part again?
Pardon?
Say the last part again?
The whole distinction of the tahajjud salat is the part where you stand and you make the dua before you go down in sujood, right?
So, no, actually. You don't have to make that. That's what they call qunut, right?
Qunut, right, qunut, yes.
Qunut with an N.
I thought that was the whole distinction of, I guess the primary distinction is getting up in the middle of the night.
Right. So first off, you don't have to make qunut when you make tahajjud. That's
okay.
You don't have to. That's not an integral part. It's not the distinction. The distinction is just that you're making nafil prayer in the middle of the night.
Okay.
That you get up in the middle of the night after sleeping for tahajjud and you make some extra rak'ah. Right?
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Now, the qunut, according the Malikis actually don't make qunut at night.
Okay.
Hanafis do. I think maybe the Shafis do too. They'll make it in witr. They'll make it in the last rak'ah of the night that they'll make before they go to bed. You'll see it sometimes if you go make tarawih during Ramadan at the masjid. depending on what the imam follows, he may make qunut in Salatul Witr, right? In the last rak'ah after you've made all the time. You follow me?
I do. I don't do. Yes, I hear you, but I haven't participated in the prayers during Ramadan like that.
And you don't have to. And you don't
Right.
have to. It's not a far.
Right.
But that is one place where I know a lot of people have probably seen that, right?
Yes, yes.
But actually, the Malikis prefer to make qunut in the second rak'ah of Salatul Subh, of Salatul Fajr. That's when we make qunut, right? But if you don't make qunut, there's no problem. Qunut is not a fard. It's not even a what they call sunnah mu'akkada, an emphasized sunnah. You don't have to make sujood as-sahw if you miss it or anything like that. Right?
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the second question that I have is one that I raised in the chat earlier today, is about the duha salat.
Yes.
And if it can be combined with an intention to use it for istikhara as well, because it's okay.
Yes, and I shared a link to an article about that on a website that I like to use, a resource called Seeker's Guidance. A lot of the folks on Seeker's Guidance they're mostly not Maliki. I think there's some Malikis in there, but this is actually, I think, a Hanafi opinion. So you may find some different opinions, but this is what I'm familiar with. That yes, you can combine intentions. So you can say, okay, I'm making my istikhara at the time of Salatul Duha, hoping to get the benefit of making Salatul Duha and making istikhara. This is permissible, right? It's good if it's always good to make more ibadah. So if you have the time to say, okay, I'm going to make 2 for istikhara and then 2 just for Salatul Duha, alhamdulillah, that's great. But if you only have time to make the 2 and you make it at that time with the intention of doing both, this is permissible.
Okay. And the duha ayats can be anything that, any ayat that I choose in the second.
Any ayat you choose. Any ayat.
After Fatiha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the nafil prayer, you have a lot of room. So in the fard prayer, you can also do any ayat you choose. Some of the scholars I've heard people say, it's good to make at least 3 ayat, right? At least 3 ayat when you're making, reading some Quran after the Fatiha and the fard prayer. But even that, it's you can make one. Like let's say you say ayatul kursi, that's fine. As 1 ayat, but that covers you. You don't have to make 3. But in the nafil prayer, even if you forgot to read some Quran after Fatiha, it would still be valid.
Okay.
Still be valid, right? Okay. So you can say any ayat that you choose. You can say 1 ayat. You can say multiple ayat. And if you forget to say an ayat, it's still valid. You don't have to make sujood as-sahw or anything like that for that.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much.
Those are great questions. Great questions. And the great thing about questions is that everybody gets the benefit. So even if people didn't think to ask the question, I'm sure other people had the question too. Or are appreciative of the information that comes because of the questions. So, thank you. So just to finish this section, point number 4 here, it says, when disregarding a doubt, sujood as-sahw is not necessary for doubt, but it may be necessary if you add to the prayer by ignoring doubt. So this is what I was saying before. If doubt is coming to you, and the doubt that comes to you is strong enough that you say, okay, even though doubt is coming to me every day, I really have no idea whether or not I made 3 rak'ah or 4 rak'ah in this Salatul Duha. So I'm going to ignore the doubt, but how do I ignore the doubt? If I have some inclination that I probably made all 4 rak'ah, then you just ignore the doubt altogether. You don't listen to it at all. You don't listen to nothing. If I am 50-50, and so I have to do something to make sure that I made my 4 rak'ah, then how do you ignore the doubt? In that case, you make the additional rak'ah to make sure that you have 4. And you can make sujood as-sahw afterwards, right? Because sujood as-sahw after salams doesn't hurt the prayer. So you can make the extra rak'ah to make sure you have 4. and then make sujood sawa afterwards, right? Or if you have more of an inclination that you probably didn't make the 4 rakah, right? Then you don't make sujood sawa afterwards, right? Because you're trying to train yourself to not be susceptible to the doubt. Is that clear? Anybody not understand what I'm trying to say? Okay, alhamdulillah. And then the 5th point is, if you think that you acted correctly and you imagine that you made a mistake, then consider that you acted correctly. In other words, assume that you acted correctly, right? If you think you acted correctly and you imagine that you made a mistake, then assume that you acted correctly. That's what I said in the beginning of this part of the lesson. Then it says, however, if you think that you made a mistake, but you only imagine that you acted correctly, then assume that you made a mistake. And this is using the language that we discussed last week, where they say, if you have, just to make it really simple, if you are 50-50 about whether or not you did a thing in your prayer, that's doubt. If you have more of an inclination, more of a feeling, not feeling, but the thought that you did it is stronger, then the thought that you did not do it is something you imagine. If the thought that you omitted it is stronger, then the thought that says you did it is what they call something you imagine. So if you have more of a sense that you did a thing, then you just assume that you did it, if the doubt is coming to you every day, especially. And if you have more of a sense that you omitted something and doubt is coming to you every day, then you just assume, right, that you didn't do the thing and you do it, right? And when you're in that situation, right, doubt is coming to you every day, but when you're really honestly consider it, you realize it's not so much doubt as imagination. I hope you all follow what I mean by that, based on how we just defined imagination, right? Then you would act accordingly, listen to the stronger in the stronger thought, ignore what's imagined, and don't make sujood sawa, right? And after a while, inshallah, that imagined doubt will leave you. Is that clear? The way that I explain that? Does everybody feel like they understand that?
I'd like to say that it's clear, and I have a question also about how to actually. I had only learned to make the salat of forgetfulness after I taslim out once, and then so this is all new to integrate. Doing it before or after. So if I do it before, that means that I do sujood 4 times in a row before I taslim out. Before I come out?
No. Great question. How do you make sujood sawa? Great question. So if you have to make sujood sawa before salam, this is what you do. You get to the end of the prayer. You sit to make the attashahud as you normally would. And you say, Attahiyatu lillah, Zakiyatu lillah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah, Assalamu alaykum ya nabiyyu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. And you stop there. You don't say the shahada. You stop there. And you make 2 sujood. You stop there, say Allahu Akbar, make sajda, Allahu Akbar, sit in jalsa, Allahu Akbar, make sajda, Allahu Akbar, sit in jalsa, and then you do the attashahud as you normally would, including everything. Tahiyyatu lillah, zakiyatu lillah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah. You go on until you say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then you say all the, salat ala nabi and all the things that you would normally say to end your prayer, and then you salam out, to the right or to the right and the left. Because in the Maliki method, some say you just salam to your right. But if you salam to your right and left, that's fine. That's what I do. So you salam to your right and your left in your prayers first. Sujood sawa after salams, and this sounds like what you're already familiar with. Sujood sawa after salams means you say the attashahud at the end of the prayer when you sit in jalsa, like you normally would. You say everything, right? and then you salam once to the right, and then you say Allahu Akbar, make sajda, Allahu Akbar, sit in jalsa, Allahu Akbar, make sajda, Allahu Akbar, sit in jalsa, and now you say Atayatu lillah, Azakiyatu lillah, wa salawatu wa tayyibatu lillah, Assalamu alaikum ya nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. You stop there. No salatu ala nabi even. You stop there and you salam out of the prayer to the right or to the right and the left. That's what you normally do. Is that clear?
Yes, alhamdulillah. I just have one other quick question about witr.
Yes.
Is witr better done after Isha, or what I usually do is I save it for after tahajjud, because I always intend to get up for tahajjud, so I save it until after then.
Right. Both. Another good question. I'm coming to you in a minute, brother Emil. So you got your hand raised. Both are good. Both are acceptable. I remember one of my teachers. He said, who I used to attend classes with from time to time. He said, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to do it after Isha, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, he would save it until after tahajjud. So both are acceptable. But Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, the teacher, he made the point, Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his maqam was a little higher, right? And he said what we learn from that doesn't mean that Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not making tahajjud, but he would make his salatul witr in case he didn't wake up. And then once he woke up, he would make his tahajjud and he would make salatul witr again. So this is the best way. But if you know you're going to get up to make salatul tahajjud, that's your intention, that's your habit, you know you're going to do it, it's perfectly fine if you leave the witr until after tahajjud, right? Me, I make it after Isha because I'm not in the habit of making tahajjud, right? So I make sure I get the witr in. And if I get up and want to do some prayers after I get up, then I would just make it again. Last point that's relevant to this, inshallah, if you don't make salatul witr, you forget to make it, you fall asleep, and then you wake up, you get up. You have the right to make Salatul Witr before you make Salatul Subh. Let's say Salatul Subh is in. Salatul Subh came in, but you got some time before you actually make the Fard prayer. Maybe you even go into the masjid, but they make it at the masjid maybe 20 minutes after it comes in or something like that. You can make the Salatul Witr then, after Salatul Subh has come in, right? Let's say you forget to make Salatul Witr. You go to sleep before you make Salatul Witr. You wake up and, man, I got to make Salatul Fajr right now. I got to make Subh right now or I'm going to be late. You make your Salatul Subh, right? You still have a chance to make up Salatul Witr after sun rises, in the time of Salatul Duha, right? You don't make it while the sun is rising. You don't make it while the sun is rising because this is one of the times that we are forbidden to pray nafil prayer. Right? If you owe a fard, you pray it as soon as you can. But nafil prayer you don't make while the sun is rising or while the sun is setting. Some also say while the sun is at its highest point, right? At its zenith. So you wait 15 minutes after the sun rises, and then you can make up Salatul Witr.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah, no problem. Thank you for that.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Is that if you're in the habit of making witr? What you just said, because so it almost sounds like the way it was described. Maybe it was just me how I received it, and I know it's not the case that witr is a fard, which is not, right?
Not.
So
Right.
is what you just said in the case that it becomes habit, that you're in the habit of making shafa or witr?
So you know what? Yeah, go ahead. That's the question, right?
Yes, that's the question.
Yeah. So you know what? I would say yes, but Salatul Witr is a prayer that we should, once we're making our 5 daily prayers. Now, if you still, maybe you're a new Muslim, or maybe you just newly kind of really taking the prayer seriously, and I'm of the, this is the life and the time we live in. So I'm not shaming anybody. Alhamdulillah for people being serious about their prayers whenever they become serious about their prayers, right? But once you get your 5 prayers strong, you making your 5 salah, right? Then you should be making Salatul Witr. because this is the biggest of all the nafil ibadah. This is one that the Prophet ﷺ made all the time. This is so big that I think the Hanafis, if I'm not mistaken, they even give it a special designation. They call it wajib, which basically means mandatory, right? They say you have sorry about that. They say you have the fard, and then you have witr, which we won't call fard because the Prophet ﷺ didn't say it's a fard, but we're gonna say wajib, which is another word for mandatory, right? So I'm not gonna say it's not a fard, right? It's not a fard, but it's something that I would strongly encourage everybody to be in the habit of doing. So you're right. That is if it's like a weird for you, if it's something that you do consistently. But witr is something that we hope we all come to the point where we can say this is something that we're in the habit of doing. At least our intention is to always do. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Alhamdulillah. And I'm coming to you right now, Amir, but just I saw Sister Akanke also mentioned is it sunnah? Okay, so I'm gonna answer these two questions together. You said is the sunnah of Isha a requirement before making witr, and witr is just one rakat, right? So when you make the witr, it's one rakat is witr, but you should make it as three. What do I mean by that? So the Prophet ﷺ, he used to make shaf wal witr. Shaf'i, shafa, you can hear the ayn, shafa wal witr. Shaf means even. Witr means odd. So the way you should make your salatul witr is you make 2 rak'ah. That's your shaf, your even, and then salam out of that. When I do shaf and witr, I actually only salam out one time. But if you salam out twice, that's fine. But you salam out at least once to your right, and then you stand up and make 1 rak'ah witr, and now you've made 3 rak'ah, right? Some of the other madahib, they even say you can make it all 3 at a time, like you make maghrib, That's not what I was taught, but I believe it's permissible. But you make 3 rak'ah, right? You make at least 3. And if you're going to make tahajjud, then you might make 10 rak'ah, and then your last rak'ah be witr. But you should make at least 2 rak'ah before you salam out and make your 1 rak'ah witr. So yes, witr is technically 1 rak'ah, but your habit should be to make at least 2 rak'ah before you make the witr, right? Now, when you say, do you have to make the sunnah of Isha before witr? If you mean at least 2 rak'ah shaf to go with your witr, then yes, you should. But if you mean like when they say the Prophet ﷺ made I think it was 4 rak'ah after Isha, those two things don't have to be connected.
Okay.
If all you do is your Isha, and then at some point before you go to bed, you make your shaf and witr, then you're good.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
You're welcome. Great questions on that. Sidi Amir, thank you for being so patient, man. You had your hand up for a while. What was your question?
No, alhamdulillah, I'm enjoying the class. Sister Akanke is asking some very, very important questions that we all could learn and benefit from. So may Allah reward you, sister, for that. It is a lot of points that you raised in my days of attending the class back, when Sheikh Amin was teaching, that you brought to light that I didn't know of, such as the sujudu saw, when you recite, after salams, you recite the whole tashahhud, and then before salams, you don't recite the whole tashahhud. So that's something I didn't know. So, that's, so just to confirm that, that's true. Like that, if that what you said, what I'm saying is, just trying to reiterate what you said, about that, the sujood saw. Before and after salams, reciting the tashahhud.
Did you have another question, Sidi Amir?
No, I did. I forgot. So I'll ask you if I remember later.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Next time I'll try to.
No, alhamdulillah. I'm not. It's no problem. It's no problem.
Alhamdulillah. So, are there any other questions? before we close, I got a couple of housekeeping things to talk about, but are there any other questions before I do that?
Yes, Salam alaikum. So when you so the witr prayer, so after the Isha Salat, you do the witr, which is like wajib, which is something that we should, it's a strong sunnah, like you said.
Yeah, we say it's
like a strong sunnah. And is it the same case with when you do tahajjud as well? Is that the same case, or you just don't? I mean,
I don't understand the question.
So do you recite it as well as after the tashahhud?
Yeah.
After the tahajjud?
Yes. Oh, you're saying like, should you do both?
Yes.
Yes. So one way is if you don't have a particular intention to get up for tahajjud, then you just make it after Isha, or anytime before you go to bed, right? Another way is if you know you're going to get up for tahajjud, or you have a strong intention to get up for tahajjud, then you can wait and make it after you make it tahajjud. If you not sure if you're going to wake up for tahajjud, then it's good to make it after Isha, before you go to bed, to make sure that it's made. And then if you get up for tahajjud, then you just make it again after tahajjud.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Shukran, jazakallah.
Alhamdulillah. So if there's no more questions, we'll close out. But real quick, I wanted to. I'm sorry for that. Yes.
One more question about Shafa Witr. Do they need to be said aloud, or can they be said silently?
They should be said aloud, but they're permissible. It's permissible to say it silently.
Okay.
It's better to say out loud, but if you say it silently, it doesn't invalidate the prayer or anything like that. I say it aloud unless I have a reason not to.
Okay.
Only time I say it silently, personally, is if like the baby's sleeping, and I want to make it in the room and not wake up. Some reason to not say it aloud. But it's better if you say it aloud. But if you say it silently, it's still permissible.
Okay. Then the last question is: can it be done in congregation?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
And I'm responding to your question in the chat, Sister Akanke. Yes, the minimum for tahajjud is 2 rakat. 2 rakat. Alhamdulillah. So 2 things.
Yo, you could go ahead, Doctor. You was going to say something.
I was going to say 2 things before we close out. So just to let everybody know, to remind you all, as always, if you want to send money for Sheikh Amin, you can. I, collect from anybody who wants to send some money for Sheikh Amin, and we send him something once a month. This is not mandatory. This is not paying for anything. This is just a gift that we want to give to our teacher. And, with his medical bills and everything, and he's not able to work, it comes in handy, So if anybody wants to send money to contribute to the monthly gift that we give to Sheikh Amin, feel free. You can send it to me via Cash App. If you don't have Cash App, let me know, and I'll find another way you can send it. I can give you my Zelle, or you can send it to my wife's PayPal. We do it like that sometimes, but just let me know. And if you're gonna just Cash App it, just make sure you put, however you send it, make sure you put just a little note saying that it's for Sheikh Amin. You can just say Sheikh Amin on the note. I'll know that that's what it's for. Also, we have been using this Zoom platform, and all this time, one of the brothers has been who doesn't really have it, has been like paying out of their pocket. So I want to change that, right? I want it to be a communal thing that we take care of. It's not very expensive at all. It's like $15, I'd like to even pay the brother back, for what he's paid out of pocket for keeping the Zoom going all this time. It's been something like a few $100s, right? So feel free to also contribute to that. I would encourage you to contribute to that if you're able to. You can use the same Cash App information and just say, you can say in the link something like for the Zoom or something like that as a note. So just want to make people aware of that. And these are all just opportunities for us to get some barakah, The Cash App I will put here. Yes, there is things outside of Cash App, ways outside of Cash App to send money. Let me give you a couple right now. Cash App, Zelle. Now add PayPal to here too. Okay. So here you got Cash App, you got Zelle, you got PayPal. And if none of those work, let me know, and we'll figure something else out. You know, I think I have Venmo too. But if one of those work, then you can use one of those. Just make sure you send a note saying what it's for. And if you're gonna do PayPal, then maybe just send me a quick text too, because I don't know if Samiha checks her PayPal that regularly. So just let me know and I'll ask her. But you can use any of those 3 ways, and that's not just for this month. That's for every month. You know? So, like I said, just add a note if it's for Sheikh Amin or if it's for the Zoom, and yeah, and inshallah we'll get it to where it needs to go. Any questions about that? Okay, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Thank you so much, alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair for all of you. Thank you for coming. May Allah reward you all, reward us all for our effort to try to obtain this knowledge. May Allah give us tawfiq in attaining it and in implementing it. May Allah forgive us for any mistakes we make along the way. Alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah, yaka ameen, ameen, ameen. May Allah forgive us. May Allah guide us. May Allah help us to spread this knowledge as well, whether it be in a class setting or with our families, or simply by implementing it and other people observing it. May Allah forgive us, bless us, and make us among the people who He counts as those who seek knowledge. We know that the Prophet ﷺ has informed us that the people who are seeking knowledge, the inhabitants of the heavens and the seas, are all making dua for their forgiveness. So we ask to be amongst those. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. اللهم أرنا حقا حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا باطلا باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من الهم والحزن ونعوذ بك من العجز والكسل ونعوذ بك من الجبن والبخل ونعوذ بك من غلبة الدين وقهر الرجال. Oh Lord, we seek thy refuge from anxiety and grief. We seek thy refuge from lack of strength and laziness. We seek thy refuge from cowardliness and mindlessness. We seek thy refuge from debt and oppression at the hands of people. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق ناصر الأخلاق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم وعلى آله حق قدره العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم جماعة. Inshallah, we'll see you next week.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Walaikum salam. Thank you.
Walaikum salam. Thank you.
Be in touch, Habib. We'll call you later.
For sure.